Welcome as we come to the second half of the discussion of Jacques Attali's brief history of the future. For those who aren't aware, we covered who Attali was, one of the top globalist French public liberal intellectual. He was also the mentor of Macron, the present French leftist. Now, we said that as we ended the first half, there would be weaponized mass migration, 30 mega cities in a few decades. That's the plan, at least. We said that this would be crucial to destroying identity. The future would be like a giant carnival where everybody thinks that they have freedom, but they're really just entertained. So essentially everything that we've talked about forever is in Jacques Attali's book. Energy will be a central factor to organizing and reorganizing, restructuring the world. Energy is, of course, a giant global scam market. Think about Enron. Just as much as banking or anything else, it's a big scam. And so greenhouse gases and deforestation and carbon taxes figure prominently in the analysis that Attali gives. And the glaciers melting and the ice caps causing the sea levels to rise and to sink the nations is still being touted by these people. So even into, I guess 2006, this was still a popular narrative. But he also mentions the ozone layer, which is supposed to be melted, and we're all supposed to be boiled to a crisp. We're all supposed to be pork rinds by now because of the depleted ozone and pollution. Right? If you remember, we know that the Club of Rome, in their first global revolution document a long time ago, cooked up pollution as a means to depopulate. So, I can't read my notes here. He thinks that by 2025, the U.S. will start to decline because there won't be jobs, and that the God myth of USA imperialism will gradually fall apart. This is actually some of the criticisms that I made a long time ago. I said that would probably happen. He says that Los Angeles is the model for the rest of the country, of course, as the test tube. But not just that, it's also the pattern for all the future megacities. So if you want to know what the megacities, the megalopolises of the future will be like, they will be like Los Angeles and Blade Runner. Right? Both the original Blade Runner and the 2049. That's the year that Attali gives for when there will be the big megacity regions. And 1 billion people will live in these cities. So if you doubt the plan is global, if you doubt the globalists have plans, then how is it they are restructuring the entire world? Now, hopefully this won't come to pass, but we'll see. The final form of mercantilism is what he's been tracing in this book. Will be in place by 2050, and as we said, 2050 is the slated period in Attali's projection for the end of all nation states, the deconstruction of all nation states into the global empire. The global middle class will bring this hyper-democracy, right, and this egalitarianism, and it'll eventually end wars, supposedly. So here he starts preaching this kind of H.G. Wells style global federation, Star Trek type stuff. And the book does, by the way, go towards planetary warfare, which he projects into the future, 2100 or so. There will be Americanism is the engine that will bring the New World Order to the globe through the market and the NGOs. In fact, it is the NGOs that are the great engine of the Americanist market, the market god, to extend a single culture, a single currency, and a single lifestyle to the rest of the world that will then transition into the phases. They'll shed the skin of Americanism like a snake, like I've said many times. Jacques Attali says it, so I was on the right track. And he says because there is a market to which all will be enslaved, this will eventually become, people will eventually become cognizant of this fact. Of course, if they're all brainwashed trannies, I don't know how they're going to wake up. Right? The trannies are not going to be woke. The market will destroy the U.S. The very thing that the U.S. extends to the globe will eventually eat the U.S. like a giant Ouroboros, because the corporations that come out of the U.S. and extend to the rest of the globe will eventually be bigger than the power of the U.S. government. So it's a true Ouroboros, right? It's a French fry eating itself. A French fry eating its own tail. So the slave market of ancient times will give way to the slaves to the market. That's my own. I just coined that. That's my new phrase. Nanotechnology will be a big deal in the future, and it will somehow fix carbon taxes. All right, so the nanotech will register your carbon usage and decide if you're allowed to live. And interestingly, the objects that we'll all be using by 2040, presumably they will be bodily modification type iPhones. You'll be wearing your iPhone, right? You won't accidentally butt dial. You will literally dial from your butt, because your butt will be a giant phone. Around 2040, the surveillance objects will be called watchers. I don't know why he says this. He says all the bots that we'll have in all of our houses, you'll have like your own little roving Alexa, your own little Johnny 5, your own little R2D2, and it will teach you things. It will connect you to the internet. You will accept what it says. It will monitor you, and you will opt into all this because of how great it'll be to have a little robotic big brother in your house, a little brother, little R2D2 brother. And they will be called watchers, which is interesting because that's the fallen angels in Daniel. A big part of this will be the giant mega insurance companies, which will be running the dystopia with, whatever the big banks are of the future, and whatever the big tech corporate companies are in the future, and the big insurance companies, and the big energy companies. So insurance and health is what will bring the New World Order. And we already saw this kind of with Obamacare. Obamacare was a kind of initial offering of the idea that AI might be able to police healthcare. AI diagnosis. And, if the AI just decides it's time for you to be put under the euthanasia rules, then sorry, it's time for you to go. And you say, well, that's crazy. It'll never happen. Oh, yes, it will. Remember Logan's Run? Right? The euthanasia laws are brought down to age 33 or 30, or it's 30 or 33, and then you die. And it was all because an AI system was in place that said you had to die at 33. That was running the town, the smart city. He says there will be a death of celebrity culture, and it will give rise to the kind of streaming YouTuber culture. And everybody will wear nanofiber clothes. And the nanofiber clothes will tell you your heart rate. They'll basically be, you'll wear your Fitbit like a shirt, your tank top Fitbit. And health, as again, there will be an interconnection between the surveillance system and health. It will be an all-seeing panopticon health system. And you'll get punished if you have too much sugar one day. You'll get punished. You'll get downvotes on Facebook if you eat too many candy bars. I'm not kidding. That's what it says. And this is to tie into like the Chinese system of Facebook social credit. They don't have Facebook, whatever they have there. Social approval determined by social media. So health leads to the New World Order. And you will imagine that you are free, yet everybody will be their own strictest prison guard, self-censoring. Page 179. He also talks about nanoblood, which is what we saw in the James Bond Spectre. If you remember, he gets nanoblood, and that's how they trace him. I don't know if nanoblood actually exists yet or not. I'm sure if it does exist, it is top secret. But according to Attali, they'll roll out the nanoblood. Again, this is his projections. I don't know to what degree Attali is really an insider and to what degree he's just projecting into the future. But it looks like a lot of what he said, again, this book was written in 2006, so 12 years ago, his 10-year projections are fairly correct. He talked about the rise of YouTubers, live streaming. This would be the norm. Old people would start doing things like Uber, right? Nobody knew about Uber in 2006, but Attali talks about these kinds of things. He says the destruction of national identity will be complete by 2050 through the addiction that we all have to our iPhones. He calls them nomadic objects, and what they will allow us to do is to travel everywhere and to be kind of our own salespeople. Corporations will be nomadic as well eventually, and this will just lead to the complete destruction of nation states and national identity. Capitalism, he says, will destroy all. It will serve the purpose that Marx originally said it would do, right? Remember, Marx wasn't anti-capitalist. He thought it was just a phase. And Attali seems to kind of regurgitate. I mean, Attali's not a Marxist, really. He is in a way, but he's the same. It's the same way that H.G. Wells is a Marxist. They're not really committed to the ideology of some strict Marxism. They're fine with saying that Marxism didn't really accomplish everything that it thought it would, but there were some areas where Marx was right, and there were some areas where the capitalists were right. And one of the areas that, for example, Attali and H.G. Wells agree, as I said, is the idea that it's not world socialism that will bring the world market. It's global capitalism that will bring the world market, and that's what will transition into the International Star Trek Federation, so they say. So capitalism is what will eat all the countries and eat all of the cultures. And you'll have things like Airbnb. You will have a perpetual solitude that you'll get used to. Nomadic, internet, Airbnb, solitude, couch hoppers, I guess. He says get used to that, because as you try to find work, that's what you'll have to do. He says that the corporations, I'm not exactly sure what he means by this, but the corporations will become like circuses. They will be like traveling vaudeville troupes, and they won't be based in any single place, but I think he means that they will basically combine with entertainment to put on shows and work in a certain area for a certain period of time. So maybe, I don't know, Microsoft will be in town to do the Microsoft exhibit, and maybe they'll hire coders for a month to come work in one place. I don't really understand what he's getting at in this circus analogy, but he likens corporations to in the future to the individuals being nomadic and being like a kind of traveling vaudeville group. He says one of the big things to bring in the New World Order is not just arts, but international sports. And soccer is a huge part of this, because we don't really care for soccer in the U.S. really, but the rest of the world, for whatever reason, loves soccer. I don't know why. It's a ridiculous game. I decided after 2 years as a 10-year-old, 8, 9, and 10, that soccer was retarded. But the rest of the world, for whatever reason, loves soccer, and this will be a big part of bringing in the international order. And giant sports events for the whole world and giant live shows. So there's going to be like these live streamed. This is interesting because he talks about the live streaming stuff. This is what we're seeing now. YouTube's rolling it out. You're listening to this. Part 1 was a live stream. So this is going to be a bigger thing in the future, because it's really just going to be cheaper, right? I mean, why have a set and actors and all this money and all this to roll out something that you can just easily live stream with no overhead cost? And this is what Attali actually predicted. And he said that there won't be record companies or any of that kind of stuff. It'll be individual artists fighting to get the money for their work. And that's really what we're already seeing now. We're pretty much in that period. He says that Musicians won't get paid from record companies. They'll get paid for live performances. He says that this future culture will produce autistic narcissists who worship themselves on their social media. Well, he was correct about that, wasn't he? He says that the live shows that will be introduced in 2040 and 50 will be these planetary-wide Running Man Hunger Games situations. Can you believe it? He says on page 200 they're actually going to introduce, he doesn't call them Running Man Hunger Games. I do, because that's what he's saying. Giant global type reality live stream sports / Hunger Games stuff. It'll probably be brutal. I don't know. But it'll be a real world. By the way, we could see how reality TV was kind of a transitioning into live streaming, right? Live streaming is going to be the future of this. So hopefully I can get in on the ground floor of live streaming, and I can be like Chris Tucker in Fifth Element. If you remember, in the Fifth Element, the biggest TV show was this trans pan hermaphrodite character, Chris Tucker, and his live stream show. And he just kind of ran around in his cat suit interviewing people with his pimp cane. His pimp cane was a microphone. And interesting too, he calls the market, the global market, which kind of is its own big beast creature, the golem. He says the market is the golem without a brain. It's a plane without a pilot. He says that what will be introduced is the giant managerial state, in that the USA will transition to globalism and FIFA and international sports. Okay, this is pages 200 through 207 is the sections where he talks about soccer being key to the New World Order. No wonder I always hated soccer. I knew there was something wrong with it. Sex will be completely removed from the idea of reproduction. It will be completely a recreational activity of pleasure, while all the children will be born in test tubes. I think he's saying, again, between 2050 and 2100. There will be surrogate bodies and clones, just like in the Bruce Willis movie Surrogates. And there will be immortals, but not immortals in the sense that we think of, but maybe somehow the clones will possess some downloaded consciousness. So Arnold in Sixth Day, basically. I'm skeptical of that. I don't think they're going to be able to download your consciousness into some clone. Cloning, maybe. They might be able to do that, but not downloading your consciousness into somebody else. I don't buy that. So the rise of pirates, which I'm not sure why he thinks there's like a whole chapter on pirates, which if there's a giant international drone force, I'm skeptical that there's really going to be a bunch of mobsters that run pirate ships. Give me a break. I don't know about that. He says Christianity and Islam will finally react against the market. They'll realize that the market is what is their chief competitor. Well, how long have we been saying that? And there will be a kind of reaction amongst Catholicism and traditional Christian groups, and they will split down the middle between the liberals and the traditionalists. Well, we already see that. And the U.S., he says, will have a temptation to become a Christian theocracy in 2040. I don't know about that, but maybe. I've said that it's possible. He actually likens our period to the Roman Empire period, so it's entirely possible that we could see that widespread acceptance of orthodoxy. Islam will try to reinitiate the caliphate, a global caliphate, and they will also try to combat the international market force, which they will eventually realize is the problem. He says that there will be nanotech weapons, and there will be GMO beasts and cat bombs, laser cats. So basically the gray goo and genetic modification will become some kind of new animal hybrid warfare where there will be GMO animals that will become living bombs. So Putin might be assassinated by a GMO cat that is set to explode, right? Or Putin's children in the future or something. I don't know, but that's what Attali says. Attali says that he agrees with Habermas. So here we go. I would venture to guess then that Attali is a fan of the Frankfurt School. It would make perfect sense, wouldn't it? That we need a global disarmament and a global acceptance of pacifism to make everybody accept the New World Order. Come on. There we go. The world government will regulate climate. Obviously, that's central to the plan. He mentions that over and over. He says eventually the super empire, though, will collapse because of various internal pressures and internal contradictions in the world empire's paradigm. That will give rise to the Star Trek universal democratic transhumanist utopia. I'm not kidding. That's what he says. That's not my prose. That's what he says. And then he goes on in the final sections to mention Karl Marx and the third wave, right? So the second wave was the planetary empire. The third wave is the transhumanist. We by the way, are living in the period of the first wave, right? The beginnings of the implementation of the New World Order, one world government, etc. Second wave will be the planetary empire. That'll collapse. And the final third wave will be the planetary universal transhumanist democracy. I'm not kidding. And the idea here is you will join the New World Order or you'll die. That's what he says on pages 256 and 257. I thought, how is that a tolerant utopia democracy if you must join or die? It sounds like a cult, doesn't it? The transhumanists are the vanguard of the radical hyper-democracy. They will become a collective, a giant Borg collective. That's what he says, not me. Pages 260, 261. They will enact the universal brotherhood of man. Oh, sounds like masonry, doesn't it? Mother Teresa and Melinda Gates and Bill Gates are the archetypal icons of the saints of the transhumanist New World Order. That's what he says, right? And you wonder why I call out Mother Teresa. Women will be on the forefront of the installing of the transhumanist global democracy because women will more easily accept it. That's what he says. Because the transhumanist global democracy will be pacifist. It will be woman-centric, feminist. It won't be male and patriarchal and aggressive. It will be trans. It'll be gay. It'll be weak on purpose. So basically, he echoes what Marilyn Ferguson wrote in The Aquarian Conspiracy. Remember all of Marilyn's reformulations of all institutions? Well, Jacques says exactly the same thing. It will become a utopia, but only when everybody has been emasculated and cut the head. When all balls are cut off and everybody's a tranny, it'll be perfect, but only then. At the forefront of bringing this Aquarian new age to the world are the NGOs. Interesting. And remember, the NGOs are the replacement for the CIA. So that's why I bitch about the CIA all the time. Right? It's not the KGB that's bringing this. It's the successors to the CIA, the NGOs, that are bringing this. And that's what Attali says. Pages 262, 263. He says everybody will be forced to submit to the, quote, common good. And you say, well, what is the common good that we'll all be submitting to? Oh, it's determined by the AI. Since we're not smart enough, you're not smart enough to determine the common good, the AI will determine the common good, and you will be forced to submit to it based on what the AI says. Oh, yeah, right, because the AI is conscious. Right? It's not programmed by globalists who will decide already ahead of time what the common good is. No, we're to believe that this is actually a thinking entity. This is why you're being told that it's a conscious entity, by the way, because it will be greater than any single person. And how dare you go against the Borg consciousness of the collective that is greater than any single individual. The megacities of 2100 will be the capitals of the continental unions. So here you go. This is what Quigley talked about. And Attali sees this coming into focus in 2100. The UN will be at the forefront of bringing it. There will be international charters on greenhouse gas emissions. Give me a break. There will be, again, this is crazy. I don't know where he gets this. The bioweapon of the future will be called blue goo, and the blue goo will have the ability to kill everyone. And only the Star Trek Federation democracy will have the power of the blue goo. So the democracy will have the ability to kill everybody with blue goo. Doesn't sound very democratic and tolerant, does it? There'll be one central bank, one central currency, the credits, right? We already know all this. Micro credits or a giant usury-based system will be everywhere. The good, as I said, will be the neural network. AI will determine what the common good is in any given situation. And the collective will have supremacy over all. Of course, that's not really a true collective. This is the globalists and the elites saying that it's a collective situation and determining what the good is in this collective situation. The global brain will then be installed in 2100. There will be an Internet of Things by which everything will be connected to the global brain, and you'll basically be cut off from this if you aren't a good globalist, a good tranny. And it will be, he calls it a collective golem. So here we go, the Kabbalistic mysticism. He literally calls a golem. This is what I was saying. Actually, 10 years ago, one of the first posts at my old blog was about AI as the golem. And I was on the right track because Jacques says the exact same thing on page 273. The AI will run and determine what the common good is. And it will be a Borg. He says, you will assimilate or you will annihilate. Well, you'll be annihilated. Right? 274. And thus, it will be a utopia. But it's only a utopia when everybody is made equal, when everybody is made to submit to the AI god, and when everybody is more feminized and not aggro, dude. Wow. And so that's the sense in which and why transhumanism is not good, is precisely because Attali says that it is what will bring the transhumanist trapno state. Being transhuman will be what it is to be rational. Not being transhuman is what will be considered irrational, is what Attali says. And he says that what's the key factor to bring us all to this is, can you guess what it is? It's the self-monitors, or our little gadgets. That's the key pathway to this New World Order. Or what I've talked about in many old talks is better known as a Schwitzgebel machine. What's a Schwitzgebel machine? It was developed by Dr. Schwitzgebel to monitor prison inmates. And it was the RFID anklet that they wore that monitored their heart rate and their location and so forth. And so what this did was it transmitted back to the guard tower, and that way the guards didn't really have to worry so much, because if the prison inmate somehow got, 100 feet out of his designated zone, it would beep, and they would be, they would know what was up. But it also monitored their heart rate. Now, interestingly, that's exactly what these iPhones and gadgets now do, which are our own private Schwitzgebel machines. So they don't even need a central panopticon to monitor everyone, because everyone kind of already opts into this. Now, I don't think that means that we have to be terrified of our iPhones and internet or anything like that. Presently, certainly it is a step to that, but the dystopian warnings and everything that we've been told, the spying and all that, this really comes into picture as a dystopian nightmare, according to Attali, who says it's going to be a utopia, right? This is what we're always told. This is why we have dystopian literature, is because the utopias are not utopias, they're dystopias. And that's exactly what it's going to be. But when this comes into the picture in terms of being really clear, according to Attali, will be 2050 to 2100. Now, I think, in 2049, it's going to already be very clear, right? We're going to be way further down the road than we are right now. But we are already seeing this now in its initial phases. And I'm speaking here of the kind of Internet of Things, tech, global brain dominance. That's being introduced now, right? From 2000 to 2018, right? We have the almost total penetration of the Internet. And that's why Bill Gates says, I want to have satellites everywhere that will give everybody, worldwide 5G access or something, whatever he said. And genetic modification, according to Attali, will bring the new man. Isn't that interesting? He says the new man. Well, that was the promise of Marxism, to bring the new man. Also, by the way, the promise of Nietzscheanism, the Übermensch, the new man, right? So Marx and Nietzsche meet here in this humanistic Promethean attempt, supposedly, to create the Übermensch. Now, again, you don't get to be a part of this because you don't get involved in this unless you're willing to submit to the tranny state. Instead of Big Brother, it's going to be Big Tranny. Right? Big Brother is gender biased, right? We have to be non-binary in it. So big tranny, big SJW will be watching you, and you're not going to be around for this anyway. By 2100, most of us will probably be passed on, unless we're one of these goofballs that actually believes that we're going to be given life extension and whatnot, or a cloned Illuminati clones. Gucci Man got Illuminati clone. So anyway, I'm joking about that by the way. But here we have yet another of the globalists just openly writing their book. And by the way, this book is promoted and endorsed by Mr. Henry Kissinger himself, the Rockefeller point man, just like Brzezinski. So when you read Brief History of the Future, you're getting the Rockefeller, CFR, Atlanticist, Rothschild, Morgan, JP Morgan, et cetera, perspective. And even though 2006, the book reads like, it's written today. Not because I think Attali was some great intellect. No, it's kind of actually a goofy book in many ways. Again, it's basically the same as Galton Darwin's Next Million Years, right? Except Attali's not writing about 1,000,000 years. He's writing about the next 100 years, right? So basically the next 100 years and his projections of the Brave New World. Oh, but don't worry. Attali assures you that it's going to be a utopia. Just accept everything that they say. Now, there's one obvious fatal flaw here, is that all of the things that Attali thinks will bring the utopia are external stimuli, right? If we just alter man's his environment, we alter his education, alter his upbringing, alter him through body mods or whatever, then everything can be fixed. We get rid of male aggression or some of this nonsense. And it doesn't recognize that man's problem is his heart. Man's problem is spiritual. It's not an external environmental problem that man has. Man's problem is rebellion against God. And all of these, the entire testimony of history is that Babel doesn't work. And yet here we have all the globalists wanting to rebuild Babel, which is interesting because I thought the Bible was stupid and ahistorical. Well, how come why is it that the world in rebellion against God always wants to rebuild Babel? That seems to confirm the biblical testimony, doesn't it? Of course it does. But anyway, so there we have it. That's Jacques Attali. This is, again, Foreign Policy Magazine recommends this as absolutely essential reading. Right? This is top of the list for Foreign Policy Magazine. So that's why we read it. You're getting graduate level stuff here at Jay's Analysis. Hope you appreciate it. And I hope you enjoyed the analysis of Brief History of the Future. Now, Attali has some other important globalist books that we will probably get to eventually in the future. We'll have to see. But this is the one that kind of came up first. It was the one recommended by Kissinger and so forth. So but there you have it. The Brave New World scenario, the Galton-Darwin scenario restated once again by one of the top globalists. Thank you for listening, and have a good week and weekend, and I will talk to you soon. I don't know. I want to go ahead and tell you guys I will try my best to have a Jay's Analysis episode up this week. It may have to just be, information or interviews that I get with people at Alternative View, because I will be in the UK for the next 10 days speaking at the Alternative View conference on Hollywood transhumanism. So I can't promise that I'll have the typical Jay's Analysis style subscriber content for this upcoming week, but what I will try to do is get one-on-ones with some of the preeminent speakers at AV9, and maybe get a little extra content to give to you guys from those cool speakers. So God bless, and I will talk to you soon.